This harrowing incident played out like a high-stakes pursuit through the swampland straddling Alabama and Mississippi. I'm your host, Stu Donald. Let's head to the Delta. The late afternoon sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows through the dense Alabama swampland. Its amber glow filtered through the pine trees, illuminating the mist curling along the water's surface. It was a deceptive kind of beauty, serene on the surface, but charged with the tension of a hunt playing out in its depths. Mobile County Sheriff's Deputy Ronald Kelso gripped the wheel as he pursued the speeding vehicle through winding back roads near the border town of Wilmer. The low light shimmered off his Ford's hood, stretching ahead like a beacon cutting through the encroaching dusk. Then, without warning, a flash. Gunfire from the fleeing car, the rapport tearing through the still afternoon air. Chatom and Wilson weren't looking for an easy surrender. They pressed the accelerator harder, the engine growling as they veered towards the swamp. Kelso radioed for backup, knowing the chase could turn deadly at any moment. The suspects didn't hesitate. The moment their tires skidded to a stop, they bolted into the murky terrain. Their figures were barely visible in the shifting light, blending with the earthy tones of the wild. Deputies Robert Stolz, David Beck, and Sam Morgan arrived within moments, their boots hitting the soggy ground as they advanced. Then, another crack of gunfire. Deputy Stolz staggered, eyes widening as the burst struck through him before he could react. The sun's golden rays caught the movement, turning this fall into a frozen moment of tragedy. Beck was hit next, his body slamming against the twisted roots. Morgan flinched as a round tore through his arm, pain flashing through him like fire. The deputy fired back, the exchange echoing across the swamp in sharp bursts. Wilson was hit, the force of the shot sending him tumbling onto the damp earth. His breath hitched as he stared up at the sky, its brilliant afternoon hues fading as his vision darkened. Chatom ran. The low sunlight stretched his shadow unnaturally as he sprinted through the marsh, every step splattering the mud around him. The bloodhound, nose locked on the scent, surged ahead, splashing through the shallow pools with eager determination. Chatom didn't stop, not until he crossed into Mississippi, where lawmen from both states closed in on him and took him without a fight. The chase was over. 2 deputies were dead and a third injured. One suspect was also deceased, while the other was in cuffs. And for what? Well, those were the events as they unfolded that fateful autumn day back in 1975. On that day, career criminals Jerre Chatom and Mike Wilson did the unthinkable, and both men paid with their lives, one instantly and the other slowly over the next 50 years. Chatom faced trial and was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, receiving a life sentence. Though he won an appeal for a retrial, his second trial resulted in another life sentence, this time for 2 counts of second-degree murder. The families of the fallen deputies petitioned against his parole, and the Alabama Board of Pardons and Paroles upheld their requests. Chatom passed away in prison in June of 2023, closing a dark chapter and serving as a lasting reminder of the sacrifices made by Deputies Stolz and Beck. Those are the facts of the incidents that are recorded now, and anyone can find this particular narrative anywhere on the internet. But what I want to provide for you now is the point of view of this entire event from the eyes of an 8-year-old boy. My father worked for the Mobile County Sheriff's Department, and at this time, my brother was a newly hired deputy as well, and both were involved in this manhunt. This entire incident took place within 10 miles or so of my home, and I can remember everyone being gathered at the house and watching TV. My sister-in-law, who was married to my brother, was a dispatcher for the city of Mobile. Her mother had been a dispatcher locally as well. They were very familiar with everyone involved, and I still to this day have a clear image of us watching the TV and them showing them pulling the bodies of Beck and Stolz into the back of a pickup truck in a muddy swamp covered with mud and blood. My sister-in-law gasped, saying, "That's David and Robert." I could tell that she was worried about my brother, and heck, so was I. But I looked at her, as confidently as an 8-year-old can be, and said, "Don't worry about Steve. daddies there. In my 8-year-old eyes, if someone had to actually come to the rescue, it was going to be my dad. Now, I remember particulars about the case that you don't really find in the narrative now. As I recall, the whole incident started because Chatom and Wilson had tried to rob a convenience store, and that's why Kelso was responding. Also left out of the narrative is both men had several felony warrants on them, which is what prompted them to go on the run to begin with. As I recall, at the time, there was some thought that it was actually Chatom who shot his partner, Wilson. Maybe he was wanting to surrender, and Chatom would just have no part of it. But I think later forensic investigation had shown that he had died because of gunshots from one of the deputies. This event was my first exposure to a flashbulb memory. And for those who don't know, a flashbulb memory is a highly detailed, vivid, and enduring memory, often associated with emotionally significant or surprising events. Some on record are where people were when they heard that John F. Kennedy or Ronald Reagan had been shot, or I can remember distinctly being in typing class when the announcement came over the loudspeaker that the Space Shuttle Challenger had exploded. This was my first flashbulb memory. And to this day, 50 years later, everything is pretty much crystal clear in my mind, including some of the new emotions that I was experiencing for the first time in life. One of them being hatred for Chatom and Wilson for what they had done. I mean, they had, this is every officer's family's nightmare. And these men had done it for no other reason than to get away. They threw away 2 deputies' lives. That infuriated me as a child, and to this day I'm still upset by that kind of callous behavior. But there is a town not far from the Delta called Chatham, Alabama, and I can remember for years being angry that they didn't change the name of this town. It seemed like it was to honor this man, but clearly there was no connection. But that's just a peek inside the mind and the emotions of an 8-year-old boy who watched this horrific incident unfurl on television, live, unfiltered, unedited, surrounded by people who were emotionally invested in the events because it was their co-workers and their family members. Our father never encouraged my brother or myself to follow in his footsteps in law enforcement. In fact, he was brutally honest. This job is dangerous. This job is thankless. It does not pay much money, and it quits being fun after a year or two. He said, go find something that's safe and don't let your family worry about you. And though my brother did dabble, but I think it was this incident that helped my brother decide he was meant to be a commercial electrician. And for a while in Nashville, I worked as a campus police officer, and that was enough to let me know that Daddy was right.